Okay, Hotep again.
Hotep.
Okay, I'm really very happy to be here tonight. I want to thank in particular Afrocentrism International UK, and in particular our brother Shiloti Prerna here for organizing this visit for us coming from Philadelphia. This is a short visit. We came yesterday morning. We hope to be back after you've organized a strong division. We'll come back to visit you again. So again, as I said, thank you very much for being here tonight. And without delay, I will get into my topic, which is the question of how do we get back on our feet, and what's the role of spirituality, what I call here sacredness, African sacredness in us, recovering our psychic integrity. And I think that's very important. We talk about African unity, but there can be no unity unless there is African consciousness. And African consciousness, and I should say Afrocentric consciousness, is really predicated upon our spiritual foundation, and more particularly on our relationship with our ancestors. So I will go a bit fast so we can have time for questions because I'm a little bit late. Please go ahead. We talk about African Renaissance. The first person to talk about it was Kwame Nkrumah. I think it was 1964, where he said that we need to be born, becoming ourselves again. That's what Renaissance means. And we're yearning for this because we're sick and tired, right?
Yeah.
Of struggling. Come from the US, we're struggling in the US. We come to England, we see that you're struggling here too. Everywhere we're struggling, and it's just not right. It's not right, and we need to put an end to this. And that's Thabo Mbeki, who probably in more recent years did more than anybody else to really have, foster this discussion about African Renaissance. And for Thabo Mbeki, in order for us to be reborn, right, there were two things that needed to happen. First, we needed to discover ourselves again, right? Because we don't know who we are. We are very confused.
That's right.
Would you agree?
That's
We're
right.
extremely confused.
I'm wrong.
We bear names that do not reflect who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And we gladly pass on those European names or Arab names to our children.
Mm-hmm.
When we meet one who looks like us and who has an African name, we are even surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Many people have asked me, why did you give African names to your children? I said, well, because they are African. You would not ask that question to a Chinese person, right? Why did you give Chinese names to your children? They give Chinese names to their children because they are Chinese, right? We keep on wearing their clothes. We keep on eating their poisonous food. We keep on wanting to be like them, and we keep on seeking, their validation, right? So if they don't pat you on the shoulder, it's a good job, Negro, then you feel uncomfortable, right? And worst of all, we keep on praying to their God. You see, the very gods that they use to enslave us, to justify our enslavement, we keep on kneeling in front of those gods. And we wonder why we struggle so much. Even if we use our brain a little bit, if nothing else, we should say to ourselves, okay, we've been doing this for 500-600 years, and clearly we're not doing very well. So maybe we should try something else.
Exactly.
Right? Maybe it's time to use our brain and tell ourselves, I've been going to that place every Sunday, kneeling in front of that white man and that white woman every Sunday, and it's not working out. I'm still not getting a promotion in my job. I'm still not, my children, being arrested by the police. So it's time to try something else. And what we need really to try, according to Thabo Mbeki, is try to be ourselves again. We ought to be ourselves again, and of course we have to know ourselves. And it starts with knowing our history, right? And Thabo Mbeki reminds us of how, Europeans, it's talking about in the South African context, but this applies to the whole of Africa. I said they, Europeans, thought to oblige us to accept that as Africans we had contributed nothing to human civilization except as beasts of burden. And he continues, in the end, they wanted us to despise ourselves, and I must say they've been pretty successful, convinced that if we were not subhuman, we were at least not equal to the colonial master and mistress and were incapable of original thought and the African creativity which has endowed the world with an extraordinary treasure of masterpieces in architecture and the fine arts. So we know they always say that aliens came, right? That they did it. That's why, Hegel separated Africa in three parts, right? There's North Africa, okay, the Arabs, there's Black Africa, land of savagery, and then there's Egypt, which is a white civilization, because only white people could have built Egypt, right? So they have no shame in terms of appropriating what other, in particular us, have done. All is to deny our agency and our genius, right? Unfortunately, we've fallen for this. A lot of Black people, and you're right. How do we get this information to our people? But that's why Afrocentrism internationally is so important. We're doing this work, on the ground in Africa as we speak, in the Caribbean. Like next month, we're opening an Afrocentric school in Haiti, where it's very much needed. So, we know we have to do the work on the ground, right? We cannot count on our intellectuals and scholars because most of us are basically lost, right? We've been so thoroughly brainwashed that we've become totally useless and in fact dangerous to our own people, right? Yeah. So we have to really start from the ground, and that's what we're doing. And we need your support, because as you know, our enemies are not going to support this, and nor should they, and nor are we expecting to support it. So we need to do this, right? So if you're interested in supporting that Afrocentric school in Haiti, let me know. We're seeking 55 people who will be willing to contribute £20 or $20 a month to help the school run, right? So go ahead, I want to move on. And so what Thabo Mbeki is saying, he said, we've done such great things that clearly we cannot accept the white image of us as inferior people, right? And so we need to think, differently about ourselves. And there's also Cheikh Anta Diop, right? We were talking about Cheikh Anta Diop a few minutes ago. It was very important, and Diop also talked about the need for us to get back on our feet. And for him, the solution was to restore our full historical consciousness. Starting in Kemet and starting in Africa, first of all, as the first human beings, with Kemet, as the beginners or starters or founders of human civilization, and all the great contributions that we as African people have made. So, a lot of research has been done, a lot of great scholars have researched Diop's ideas further, right? But we realize, and that goes back to your point, that although we know all those things, we still have what Dr. Sampe calls a low cultural self-esteem. So there's a disconnect between our intellect, right? We know those things. And I talk about here people who know those things. Probably some of you in this room, right? So we know those things. We could write books about, ancient Kemet and so on and so forth. And yet, we have very low cultural self-esteem. And this has to do with what I want to talk about tonight. And this is the colonization of the image of God, right? This is a very profound statement, in my view, one of the most profound statements, that what Europeans have done was to colonize the image of God. They've granted themselves a monopoly over what the divine is, right? Yes. And the implications of this have been very profound. First, tell us that this one is our savior and he's white. So if he's white, his father is white, right? Father is white, God is white, the boy is white, the mother is white, the angels are white.
Heaven is white.
Heaven is white, right? Everything is white. The angels are white. And then Then here Satan, right? And Satan is what color? Black. Like who? Like us. Right? So you have this demonization of Africa, and we're internalizing this. We're thinking that, okay, we're really bad people, and we need the white savior to get us out of our own, evilness. And it works wonders. You say voodoo, people are scared. Right? They're so scared. Ask them what voodoo means, they will tell you. All they can see is those dolls with needles, the zombies. But even without going that far, you have a lot of Africans on the continent who are afraid of going back to their village.
That's right.
They say, I'm not going to the village. I say, why not? Well, there are people in the village that do things to you, and they tell you about this guy they know went to the village and came back to the city and died the next day. And they are sorcerers. The villages are full of sorcerers. Am I correct? Yes. So you see, this stems from this idea, right? That Africa itself is the embodiment of evil. And that we must stay away from it. We must run away from it. And as we run away from Africa, where are we running towards? Europe. To be saved by the little white boy. Right? And it works well. Please. You have a question? Will you wait? Can you wait? Thank you. You see? Because if we really believe that Africa is dangerous, why in the world would we want to unite as Africans? What type of unity in evil would be? Right? But yet this is what we have to deal with and fight against, right? So the political implications that basically white supremacy on earth is simply a mirror of white supremacy in heaven, right? God is white, then the people around the world should also be white. And you should not contest that. Because if you do that, that's an offense to the white God. So whenever white people come, you agree, you bow down, you shut your mouth, and you go along. You don't challenge them, because you don't challenge God. Then, the theological implications that, again, if God is white, then white people are his children, not blacks. I already told you whose children we are, so we understand that. And the psychological implications is that this is very profound, very, very profound. And sometimes we don't realize this, but the idea, again, is that we can only experience the divine by going through white people, right? So what does that mean? That means, next please, right? That means that we ourselves are not divine, and that we must rely on them to experience God. And that's why we have to go to their churches. That's why we have to kneel before their white saints, Mary, whatever, whomever. And we have a very great difficulty thinking of ourselves as sacred as African people. Now, if you don't think of yourself as sacred, as special, you will accept to be treated any kind of way by people who tell you that they are God's chosen people. Do I make sense?
Yeah.
You see? So that's our predicament. That's our predicament, because we don't think that we are sacred. We don't think that we deserve the best. That's why we settle for so little. Right? We settle for very little. We let anybody come into our space and trample upon it, trample upon our ancestors. How many ancestral shrines were destroyed by Europeans and Arabs alike? And we didn't see anything.
That's right.
And we even started participating in our own desacralization, right? So that's really our problem, because what happens is that our foundation then becomes extremely weak, and we're very vulnerable. extremely vulnerable. Anybody who comes and tells some incredible story about someone who's going to walk on water on Sunday and we just rush, give them all the little money we may have. We're waiting for a miracle. We've lost it. We've really lost it. People who come and get all of our money, promising to pray for us to go to heaven, and we believe them. We've lost it. We've lost it because I think you.
Yes.
Well, no.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Go,
you
go.
really go very fast. Go ahead.
Go forward again?
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead. I want to.
Okay, right. And again?
Yeah, go forward. No, I'm going too fast now.
Oh, okay, my apologies. Okay, so.
Okay, anyway, what I wanted to say though is that it's all bluff, right? It's all bluff because what makes something sacred is what? If I should tell you that this is sacred water, would you believe me? You would believe me?
Maybe yes, maybe no.
Maybe yes, maybe no. Why wouldn't you believe me? What would I have to do for you to believe me that this is sacred water? And that I won't charge you an arm and a leg for you to get some of it. I can try? And how would you know? Because you see, all this is based on faith. You see? It's bluff. It's total bluff. Right? That's all it is. And human beings, we need sacredness. Right? We need sacredness because it gives us boundaries and it gives us a sense of protection that we need. And so you have people who are clever enough to create religions. Religions don't fall from the sky. Don't believe anyone who tells you that God told them this and that. This is not true. Use your brain. Right? No, I mean seriously. Right? It is, right? It is basically a community of people who would agree that this works for them. So if here as a group, we determine that it would serve us well to consider this to be sacred water, then it would be sacred water. We human beings confer sacredness to whatever
That's right.
works for us. Do I make sense?
Yes.
It's arbitrary, but necessary. And so we see that in Africa, of course, there are many places that are sacred. Where we bury our ancestors is sacred land. Right? Some trees are sacred. Some animals are sacred. It's human beings who made that decision. We may not remember when it all happened and how it started and why it started, but it's nonetheless true. This is the Tano River. Anybody from Ghana? You know what I'm talking about here, right? Yeah, the Akan people said this is our sacred river. Yeah. Because they say that this is where we as a people began. It's that simple. You see anything special, remarkable about that river? I mean, honestly, I don't mean to offend our brother, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's no mighty river or anything like that, right? But it is the sacred river for the Akan people because it works for them, right? Just like the Yoruba people. Go ahead.
Yes, there's
Yeah,
two.
okay.
Yeah, both.
Okay, and the other example, I had the Yoruba people with Ile Ife. They said this is our sacred city because this is where we began as a people, right? The problem that we have, so we've done this, you can move forward. The problem that we have is that we've lost sight of our ability to create sacredness. And we've lost sight of this because we've been under the influence of people who affirm that as African people, we cannot be sacred.
That's right. That's right.
And we've bought into that narrative, you see, and now we behave like people who are not sacred. Do I make sense?
Yes.
And that's our major problem. Everything else would be resolved if we walked around knowing that we are sacred people. That we don't need them to feel sacred, that we have as human beings what it takes to create our own sacredness. That we don't have to go to Mecca, or we don't have to go to Jerusalem or Rome to experience the sacredness. This space here could be sacred. You see, it's very important that we have lost that. I'm giving an example of Simo Kimbangi, right? Some people, claim that he's this great, person, liberator, and I'm not denying that, he tried to rebel, but he told his followers that they should not drink palm wine, that palm wine was not good enough for their God, that they need to drink grape wine. No, I know that some people will tell me, well, the grapes do grow in Africa. All right. But you know what I'm saying, right? That the white people's God was the best one. Because the God that was being served was a white God who was used to drinking grape wine. So when you do this, you see the economic aspect of course, all of this. Because now you have to produce grape wine, you have to abandon your own palm wine because it is unworthy of the God that you're serving. You also have now to go far away, right? Take all of your savings to make pilgrimages to faraway places, and guess in whose pocket that money gets. When you go to Mecca, who gets the money? The Arabs. When you go to Jerusalem or Rome, who gets the money? You see? And so it's, we participate in this. Go ahead, I want to move on with this again. Yeah, this is a mosque, Touba in Senegal. Now, I asked a young brother, is there a sacred site I'm talking about spiritual site in Senegal? He said no, it's only Touba and some cathedral he mentioned in Dakar, and there's no sacred site in Senegal. I said, what about where your ancestors are buried? This is not a sacred site. He said, no, it's not. But this mosque is.
Yes.
You know what that is? Go back. That's the basilic, right, of Yamoussoukro in Ivory Coast, right? So imagine the millions of euros or dollars spent on building this. But there's not a single place in Ivory Coast that is recognized by the government as a sacred site for black people. And we're changing this because our organization is building a temple for ancestral reconnection in Ivory Coast. We have to change this. This cannot be, that we will accept, right? We will accept that this is the sacred site. It's not possible. We have to build one. There are many, but we have to bring them back into our people's consciousness and validate our own experiences ourselves, right? So I want to say that the worst crime of colonization has been the desacralization of Africa through the colonization of the image of God. And that we need, again, to resacralize ourselves. And we can do it. We must do it. Go ahead, please. Now, what happens when we participate in the sacralization of other people? Well, again, we visit their holy places, we give them our money, and we basically participate in their deification. Because don't make no mistake, a religion is nothing but the deification of a particular people.
That's right.
Why do you think the Jews and Christians tell you that they are the chosen people?
Because they chose themselves.
Yeah, they chose themselves. It's their religion. And when you practice, Judaism or Christianity, you're participating in this narrative and you contribute to making those people indeed chosen. But if some are chosen, what happened to the other ones? They were not chosen. So you agree with that. You agree that you were unworthy of being chosen by God. And it doesn't bother you. We go ahead and we were so proud, we talk about, black Christianity, Jesus was black, all kinds of nonsense, right? All is to avoid dealing with our lack of courage and really of morality. So we have those brothers going to Mecca, basically participating in the deification of the Arabs. Now we have a sister who's extremely happy because she's holding a white man's hands. Instead of marrying a healthy, good-looking black man, she decided to marry this, I don't know how to call it. It's crazy. It's really crazy. It's this fictitious white man who supposedly existed over 2,000 years ago, whom she's never seen, will never see. She would rather marry him, than have, black children to, and you see how they were all happy for her. That's what I'm talking about our desacralization. We participate in this, and it's so terrible. It's so terrible. And then we turn our back onto our ancestors, right? And as we turn our back onto our ancestors, of course, we become further and further weakened by this. Because as African people, we know that our ancestors are with us, in the invisible world, but they're still here with us. But we ignore them. We ignore them because we're so busy worshiping their God. Right? We're so busy, we're so obsessed with Jesus and Allah. We're so busy, making our travel plans to go to Mecca or Lourdes or God knows where. Like we have any business going there. As if those places were set up for us and by us. Seriously. And when we do this, we affirm our inferiority. And our enemies know they don't have to worry about us. Because everything we do and say affirms that they are superior. How do you expect us to really rebel and organize to do anything on our own behalf? It's impossible. Psychologically, we're totally gone, right? And interestingly enough, like Dr. Sade was saying, when you tell black people, you should venerate your own ancestors, they say, oh no, this is spooky, I'm not doing this, let the dead be dead, right? And yet, the very people, right, who tell you that you should not do those superstitious things, when you think about it, I don't know of any people who are more into venerating their ancestors than Europeans.
That's right.
No, seriously.
Seriously.
These people are serious about ancestral veneration. Think about it. They give the names of their ancestors to their schools, their parks, their airports, their streets, their train stations, their children, their cultural centers, their colleges and universities, their buildings, their cemeteries, their dogs and their cats. Isn't it so?
Yes, it's true.
Why do you think they do that?
To remember them, so that their ancestors stay alive.
That's right. The ancestors are always with them, and I also have that. They also have statues and masks for them.
Yeah.
If you look around, you'll see a lot of statues of white people, supposedly dead. So if the dead are dead, that's what you tell us. Why do you have, why do you have statues of your dead, and I can't have statues of my dead? Right? Why is it so? They have special ceremonies for them. This is a picture. This is a picture I took a few years ago in southern France. It was May 8th. Right, for 1945, they had this armistice. They're always fighting. So this was to commemorate those French soldiers who had died for France. And so they had flowers. Basically these are offerings to their ancestors. This is really what it is. These are offerings for the ancestors. What they offer to the ancestors is flowers. We offer food. They offer flowers. What is best? What is best? Well, yeah, but if they offer flowers, I don't have a problem with it. If they feel that, hey, this is what's best for the ancestors, that works, right? But why is it that when I offer food, then they have a problem with it? And we have a problem with it. They say, oh, well, the dead cannot eat. Well, can they smell? They can smell, can they? Yet nobody has a problem with them, right? Taking flowers to the cemeteries and so on and so forth. These are offerings to their ancestors. And then they also have special music for their ancestors. They do, and they play that really loud. They bring the trombones and everything else, right? So they have no problems, no qualms with venerating their ancestors publicly. But we are not supposed to do it. And if white people tell you shouldn't do something, you should really do it.
That's right.
You really should do it. Like if they tell you to admire someone, you should despise that person.
Yes.
Like they tell you to admire Nelson Mandela, you should despise him. They tell you to admire Gandhi, you should despise him. Right? So if they tell you not to do something, you should do it. But the reason why they do this, again, is to surround themselves with the energy of their ancestors. Right? Because they know that that energy is extremely powerful. And the reason why they don't want us to do it is because they want to deprive us of that energy. So sometimes people tell me, well, Mama Zama, aren't you afraid the way you speak? You don't think someone might try to shoot you? I say, no, I'm not afraid because I'm not alone. Walking with your ancestor gives you a lot of courage. But when you don't have that, you think you're alone. And you start being very shaky. Right? Very shaky. And this is what they want. And this is what has happened to us. We've been a very shaky people. And the other reason why they also have the ancestors around them all the time is because it's for them a way to affirm that they are still loyal to their ancestors' project of world domination. So, for example, they make, I don't know about the UK, but in the US they make a big deal of Christopher Columbus. Last Monday was a holiday. Everything was closed down to celebrate Christopher Columbus. Do they do that here too?
No.
No, they don't? Okay, but in the US, that's their number one white hero, right? And rightly so. He did a lot for them. So they honor him. The problem is that we also honor him, and that becomes very problematic. So, go ahead.
Yes.
All right, so again, I've already talked about a dislocation as a people, and dislocation from an Afrocentric perspective means that we don't operate on our own historical and cultural terms, but we adopt, right, European ideas and viewpoints. I want to give the example of a young man that I met not too long ago in Paris, and who told me that when he went home and told his parents that he wanted to go back to the village to learn more about their traditions, they locked him up for 2 months. And every day there was an African Catholic priest who came, Cameroonian, and to whip the devil out of him. Simply because he wanted to learn about, right, the family's traditions. This is how serious it is, and this is very tragic, right? So this is our situation, right? So when you bring that up, you start problematizing the relevance of Christianity and Islam for us, then people say, well, the message of Christ or Allah or whatever, Muhammad, is universal. They're talking about love. And who does not need love in their life? Right? Who does not need love in their life? The problem is that the record, as we know it, of Christianity and Islam is a very bloody record. Right? It's extremely bloody. And then others, still is. Other people say, I needed a support for my spiritual quest. I found Islam, I found Christianity. What's the problem? Well, the problem again is that religion is about deification. And so if you want to participate in the deification of white people or Arabs, you should just say so. Instead of hiding it behind, this, I just need to, a support, a vehicle for my spiritual needs. So, in terms of Afrocentricity, we are very clear that our traditions are the best for us. We created them out of our own reality. We created those traditions out of our needs, right? These are the oldest traditions in the world. Please go ahead.
Yes.
right? And we repeat again that we will never have an African Renaissance unless we reinscribe what I call our sacredness really in our very heart. And we really need to do this. It is very, very serious. And for us, that's Afrocentricity International, we don't just talk about what needs to happen, we try to make it happen. You know, we follow in the footsteps of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA. Marcus Garvey didn't just talk, run his mouth, but he actually acted to bring about, you know, the renewed strength of African people. And so we're doing this, as I said to you, in Ivory Coast, by building a temple. We've also produced, because it's one thing, of course, to have a temple, but you also, of course, need rituals, which we have created, and we've also created a holy book, an African holy book. You thought we couldn't do that? You know, there's the Bible, right, and the Quran? No, we can do that too. We can play that game, right? It's a game. We can play it, and we must play the African game, you know, to put ourselves back together. So we have a sacred book that is a book of African wisdom from the most ancient times, and we have 7 chants in it, you know, that our divisions all over the world use already. We have our sister Etombe, who is a member of AI France, who can testify to this. That every once a month they had the call for the ancestors in Paris, right? Where they use this book. We have rituals, because it's one thing, of course, to tell people to get out of Christianity, get out of Islam, and they say, then what do I do, right? What we want is really reorient our people towards their ancestors, towards our ancestors. That's the first step. And so this is our contribution, this book, rituals, and the temple that we want to are building in Africa. And so I will end here by saying that the time has come for rational, remember we also have to use our brain, and reason response to our most profound crisis, which is the crisis of our soul.
I
Very much. That was really great. Did you enjoy that?
Yes.
A lot of information there, copies in there. Thank you very much. So I'm sure we've got time to take questions now. Many of you are interested in spirituality. Many of you maybe want to move away from the religion you've been given as a child. The thing with religion, we get it from so young, and it was given to us for the most part from our parents. So because we trust our parents, we just accept it like it's normal. But when we get a bit wiser, we realize that maybe it wasn't made for us, and we can see how it desacralizes us, our continent, everything we do. So some questions please for Mambo Ama. It's a really great talk we just had. So some questions please. I'm going to come back to you later. So at the back there please, sir.
Barbara? Yeah. Yep.
No, not yet. No, you take this.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You're back. That's your father speaking.
Yes, beautiful. And agree totally with what you're saying. But I think that we have to be careful about how we talk about our spirituality, and that it is our own creative and divine right to create anything that is sacred, anything we want. But
Can you repeat that?
It's our own divine right. We are divine beings having a divine human experience. And so we can create anything to be divine and create it as sacred. Absolutely. But we don't want to fall into a trap, I feel, of competing with other religions and other concepts and saying like it's a game and it's intellectual. Because as you know, and everybody who's explored the African spirituality and your connection to the all is real. It's not something that you that you have to.
You are speaking to a voting process.
Yes,
I hope
exactly.
you realize that.
Yes, exactly.
If I said again, maybe I should have used that in the word, but I was emphasizing the fact that the matter is in our hands. That's
Exactly,
what I meant.
exactly, and
Okay,
I agree with you totally. And I think that's the main point of it. The main point of it, that it's not that it's in our hands. It's our divine right to do so, and that totally agree with what Afrocentric International is doing, and that first point of having a connection to your spirituality, to the all, to the Creator, personally, is the first step. And once that starts to happen, everything else falls into place. So it's really a statement and agreement with what is being said, and just a little bit of a clarification for myself, for yourself.
I'm sorry if I used the word again, but I was emphasizing human-made nature of this whole thing, and it's not a matter of competing per se, but at the same time, we need weapons, because there's a war that is going on. There's a spiritual, religious war, and we need to give ourselves weapons, right? So we hesitated a lot before producing a written text, because we have many texts, but then our people are used to, right? The people that we are trying to get out of churches and mosques are used to a written text. And so we had to make a concession and say, we have to put something written in their hands as well. So that, when they have this urge to open their Bible or their Quran, then here they have the glory book of Afrocentric International. So it's not about competing, but it's about having weapons. And we must forge those weapons out of our own tradition.
And they're based on truth.
Of course, based on our African truth.
Absolutely.
Chosen people is not originally Hebrew. It's contained in some of the prayers in ancient Kemet. For example, your decrees are gracious and beneficent and fulfill their purpose. Give of life and many years to your favored ones. Protect of your chosen ones. Those are things that the Jews in their stay in Kemet appropriated for their own purpose. So it's nothing, the concept of a chosen person is nothing new to us. It's part of our historical consciousness.
Yes, I would agree. However, we didn't go around the world trying to convince other people that we were the chosen ones and they were not. We didn't use that, right, to belittle and put down anybody else.
Different thing.
You see, and that's my major problem here. It is normal that people who create a religion, right, who create the God that works for them, should say that they're the chosen people of that God, right? Because after all, they're creating that God. But it's not normal that we should go around and impose that on other people who have their own spiritual reality, who have created their own gods and goddesses. That's the problem. And that's a major difference between Europeans and us. Right.
Okay, my brother in the front there, yes, please, yes.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. My name is Sheni.
Sheni.
I'm very grateful to the two eminent speakers because they've really opened our mind to a lot of things that we wouldn't have thought about, and then it's a way of pushing us forward towards actualizing the freedom of our people, because it's essential. But some contributions, as before the question, is that for anybody who is in doubt about what the eminent professor just said about this mental colonization of religion, I also did some degree of religious studies, and you'll be familiar with Professor Ismail Farouki from Temple University as well. In 1982, he traveled around Africa and he was giving lectures on law and some other things. But could you believe that immediately the man got back to America, a few months later he was assassinated? Because when he was in Africa, he was saying at the uni that we are so much sort of overwhelmed by so-called development of the West. They are just structures. You don't need to have skyscrapers to be developed, but your mind is very essential. And he was a professor of religion from Temple University. Now, but he was assassinated. But if we don't believe now, what about China? China would not have liberated herself if she was under Christianity or Islam. Yes. That was the core of the liberation of China. And because the Chinese have overtaken the white supremacy, they feel so ashamed and every time attacking China. And then unfortunately, Africans are contributing. But the Chinese have debunked that notion that because of their color, they are great. Now, every Sunday, if you go around London, for instance, you will hardly see any English or European in the church, except Africans and South Americans. And that was also the reason they had to choose a pope from South America, the Argentine man, because Christianity is losing its favor, except the foolish, Africans. So the other point about the debate in America about Hillary Clinton, that the Russians influenced Donald Trump to win. Donald Trump never won the vote because Hillary Clinton won that election by 2,861 votes. So they claim they are sort of democratic, but America has never, right from inception, been a democratic country. A black man is still 3/5 of man. Yes. Barack Obama was saying when Morsi in Egypt was toppled, they asked him that he was elected based on 52% of the votes. Why was he removed by General Al-Sisi? He said, you don't have to deal with democracy all the time. Civil war happened in Algeria in 1990 because a particular political party won 75% of the vote. But France and other European countries did not want that party. And they cancelled it, and the country had to go to civil war. And that's what they do everywhere. So, brothers and sisters.
Are you giving a lecture or asking a
Yes. So my question to you is, how do you let us get those books? The book, the spiritual.
There's some copies here.
Sorry about that.
The book is available to members of Afro-Centristic International, right? So join, and you will have access to the book and many and the rituals. You see, we created 13 rituals because, you know, what if you want to get married? How are you going to get married? You go to a church, put a white dress on? Don't you think you're going to look a bit ridiculous? Seriously, right? What if you die tomorrow? What's going to happen to you? You just put it in a hole and be done with it? What are the rituals, right? What if you had a child who's being born? What's going to happen? You just, you know, so there are rituals as African people that we observe for the 4 critical moments of existence. And so we created all those rituals and added a few more because we also need to commemorate and respect our ancestors, those who suffered enslavement, those who suffered colonization and resisted colonization and enslavement. So we have many rituals, and all this, you know, if you become part of AI, you would participate in. And this is a worldwide movement. It's not just in the UK, it's in France, it's in Switzerland. We have a sister here who was a member of Switzerland. You want to stand up? You see, she came all the way from Switzerland to be here because we are a family, right? We are in Africa. I'm very proud to report that it is in Africa that the organization is fastest growing. Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Gabon, Senegal. Now we are in Mali, which very soon will be in Angola. We are in Gabon, we are in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, we are in Centrafrique, Ivory Coast, of course. And the reason why in all those countries, because African people on the continent feel the need for a new paradigm.
Absolutely.
That paradigm, of European inferiorization of African, degradation. This paradigm really was sick and tired of it, and so Afrocentricity is, proposing, something new based on a reevaluation of our history and our culture and an embrace of ourselves as African people at the deepest level possible, which is spiritual.
Okay, so,
My
you go ahead, sir. Let me-
question was deferred, I remember.
Yeah.
Okay, you go ahead, please.
The question was about the temple in the shrine. The temple, like you wanted to know where we were in that process. Am I correct?
I wanted to know about the mention about the project of the initiates from Africa. For example, Bob Basson is initiated to Dumbok, and Dumbi Fakole is initiating the Komo. And as Sheikh and Tajab did prescribe that they should have a clergy, like an association of all initiates in Africa to build a single so-called African spiritual system.
Yes.
Because they have fundamental
Similarities.
But the language is French.
The
The language of communication amongst the Dumbe Fokoli's group is French.
Yeah, I speak French.
No, but I'm just saying to you,
Yeah,
in terms of Mali,
yeah,
Bambara or Bamana is the spoken language,
Yeah.
but the language of communication in his group
yeah.
is based upon French.
Yeah, once that's done, we can adopt Swahili to communicate. It doesn't matter. As long as we can understand each other. Yes, it does.
Okay, may I answer? May I answer?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. This is what we try to do with Mwikadilo Muya. You see, Mwikadilo Muya in Chiluba means to become sacred. And what we did with Dr. Asante was to create, not from nothing, but based on all the work that we did when we put the Encyclopedia of African Religion, which is a 2-volume work, which is a massive survey of African spiritual traditions and beliefs, right? Where we covered the North, the South, the West, and the East, and found those profound similarities. So we created a truly Pan-African system based on what we observe to hold everywhere in Africa. And the first and most fundamental is this ancestral veneration. That African people all over Africa and the African world understand that it is imperative to have and to maintain an active, dynamic, and respectful relationship with one's ancestors. That the well-being, personal, but also the community, is really what is at stake. So we use that knowledge that we gain from that research to put those 2 volumes together to create Mwikadilo Muya. So if I give you an example of a ritual that we created. When a child is born, all over Africa, there is, most of the time, I want to be cautious, because somebody say, oh no, we don't do that in my people. So, I'm going to say most, right? Although I think all, there's the naming ceremony.
Yes.
Right. When the child comes in the world, and what varies in the number of days. Some places 3 days, 4 days, 7 days, 9 days, 8 days, but everywhere or almost you have this naming ceremony. So we put that in there. Because all African people can relate to that and understand what we are doing. Now we say when you have a child, don't take that child into a church or mosque. You have what you need. And since you forgot, we're giving you the ritual back. We're reminding you, and we keep telling you what to say because you forgot. But we're trying to bring back that epic memory. You see? And so same thing for wedding. In fact, we celebrated a beautiful wedding in Canada. Well, we had 3 couples who got married last year. It was truly beautiful. It was so beautiful that Afrique Media even wanted to play it on TV. And what it looks like when African people get married using their traditions, it was simply marvelous. And everybody in there wasn't married said, I want to get married like that. You know, because it came from us. So it resonated on a very profound level. Nobody asked the women, where's your white dress or anything like that. It was just so beautiful, being African. So that's where we are. I don't know where Bob Bassong and Dubi Fankoli are, but where Afro-Centricity International is, we're very clear, we've done the work. Now, if others want to get on board, that's fine. If they don't, then let them come forward with their proposal. But if it comes from very African, it will not be very different from what we've come up with.
So, Shakara, I'll come back to you, Nicole. Yeah, you spoke before. Must just in the front here? Yes, please. Oh.
My name's Kandaki.
Yes.
It was similar to what this brother is saying, but we know within the traditions of Africa, of course, they have their own temple systems, and we still have temple systems in place in different parts of Africa. And although they may be of different religions and traditions, respect each other, and they will interact with each other. So my question is, do you have a kind of interactiveness with the indigenous temples that are already in place, which the system is also attached to the culture, which is the wide aspect of African unity?
We are building our temple in Africa, in Ivory Coast. There is no temple for the ancestors or any other divinity that we've seen in that vicinity or that anybody has made us aware of. A lot of those spaces exist physically but are abandoned, are in disarray. I'm reminded that the person who's in charge of keeping the Yoruba shrine abandoned it not too long ago to become a Christian. Can you imagine? Do you remember that? You see? Yeah. The highest, at the highest level, the person who is the guardian of the most sacred Yoruba tradition abandoned it to become a Christian. So yes, those spaces exist, but how active are they, right? What we are trying to do is not compete, not at all. In fact, before we even purchase the land, we ask for permission from the village, from the person who's responsible for distributing the land. We ask for permission. We invited, remember, we went, we had to do this, right? To pay our respects. So it's not in opposition at all, but it's really to facilitate the revalidation of our traditions, that we are doing this, setting up that temple and saying, look what we're doing. And what we're doing is not grounded in a particular tradition per se, but again, a more Pan-African outlook, so that people who are seeking, right, a spiritual place can come to the temple and feel very comfortable. Whether people who come from the vicinity or far away, they will be able to relate to what we are doing there, because it's African. If we do a libation, they will understand, right?
True.
Sorry, I'm just saying that because I've seen where...
You went to Africa a few years ago, didn't you? You went partisan rituals?
I'm initiate with those. Okay. I see where those temples meet with the Wudong Queen Temple in Benin, and I've been with them and they share knowledge. So that's why I'm saying that. In Ghana, they have temples and they go across Togo, Mali, Benin. That's why I'm saying that. There is still indigenous temples there. So I was just wondering how
we will do that once our temple is being built, and we want to multiply those temples. We want temples from all traditions, not just Weka de Lumula. Again, I am initiated in Vodou, right? But I'm not trying to build a Vodou temple per se. Our temple will be different in the sense that we're grounding it in ancestral veneration. Our purpose is to reorient ourselves in the right direction, which is the direction of our ancestors. You see? Now, the people who will come through the temple hopefully will want to be initiated initiated into a system that is indigenous to them, if there is such a system, right? Because right now we are afraid of going into those neighborhoods. So how do we reconcile ourselves with Africa? That's our main purpose. That's where we start.
Okay, my brother at the back, you
Oh yes,
please go ahead.
I'm Mori Keita. I'm very grateful to be here with my family. It's been like a dream to be able to see Mr. Molefi and Mama. But I would like to know, because I'm really concerned about the children, what tools you think we should have, especially if we don't trust the educational system that we have at the moment. We want to look after our own by educating them. What would you advise us to do in order to get back on the road to learning our
ways?
Our ways, yes. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. There's a lot that you can do. One of them could be to educate your children at home, not to surrender them to the school system, which is going to brainwash them. Another thing is to read books. In fact, I don't know if you saw on the table that Afrocentricity International is very much involved in producing books for our children. We have 2 volumes we call African Foundations. These are books that are made for our children, right? To teach them about our great, personalities. Starting with Menes, if you see the volume 1, we start with Kemet, and it's a truly Pan-African book, because again, it's very important for our children to understand that the African world is much larger than where they are located. So if you look at those 2 books, and those books were translated in many languages, including Haitian Creole, but also in Portuguese, in French, English. So we're doing the work for the children, because we very much, and when I say for the children, honestly, the parents would learn a lot from reading those books as well, because the reason why we don't teach our children better is because we don't know much ourselves. So my recommendation would be, and please do not take this, as a personal offense, but learn as much as you can yourself, so you can transmit. You cannot transmit what you don't know, right? So that's very important.
Shaka, please, yeah. Say something, sir. I'll come to you after, sir. Yeah, thanks.
I'll go after Brother Daddy.
Go on, my brother.
Yes.
Please, yes.
I'd like to say thank you very much for your presentation and as well the work of yourself, Dr. Molefi. My question is very simple, and it's regarding the book, because both of your work, the encyclopedia, was very useful in my own research in the work that we produced, because that was in the public domain, and it was lovely to see a book with such a price, because then you have to say it's the knowledge that worth it to invest. Why is this particular book?
Explain to him, we didn't get that money.
Oh, okay.
That's a lot.
Okay. Why do you want to keep that book, in a sense, exclusive to Afrocentricity when it could be of use to those who, because that book could actually inspire them to join, as opposed to it being, you have to get in first before. Is there a particular rationale for that?
Yes, there's a particular rationale for this, which is that we need to grow the organization. Alright? So, grow the organization, make it get bigger, so if we make everything we have available, what is the incentive for you to come? Because we need your energy. You see, it goes both ways, that's math, right? You want it, and then come join us, and when we come back, then, there will be many of you, and as there are many of you, then we can do more, you see? It won't be just 2 or 3 people, but it will be 10, 15 people who are committed to Afrocentricity International. Too often we want to take, but we don't really give, but we have to give back in order to receive. So that's what it is. I hear you, you're right, but at the same time, we need members, people who are going to be serious about the work that needs to be done on the ground.
Thank you.
Come to you afterwards. Yep. Go quickly, something.
Good first, don't worry. My question, Mama, is in relation to the relationship between spirituality and politics. Yeah, just to contextualize quickly. Brother Dalian, who just spoke, is the co-producer of a documentary series called Ancestral Voices. Yeah, excellent piece of work for those of you want to get an introduction to African spiritualism. Please get it. You know what I'm saying? Because yeah, I always make that clear for people that don't know. But I mentioned it because at the launch of his book, I remember Reverend Walker speaking about the fact that we don't have edifices that are dedicated to our traditions. Yeah, you go anywhere on the continent, you want to find Muslims, you go to the big mosque. Yeah, you want to find Christians, you go to the big church. But we don't have edifices. So I want to congratulate the work that you're doing to build that edifice, because it's needed. And many people will say that we need to be finding ways to organize across religions, because of the fact that, you know, we're the best one in the world. We're not going to get all of our people outside of these religions but overnight. However, in this dispensation of time, there is a need to consolidate our power as African spiritualists, yeah? And so somebody needs to do the work of focusing on that particular issue. We have an issue at the moment where people are coming into African spirituality in various different ways, but in a very depoliticized or apolitical form. It's just all fancy fairy business and all kinds of different things. And then there's a scholarship aspect, which is like we're studying the text and we're illuminating on these things, but we don't have a true understanding of Pan-Africanism as a political ideology and its goals. Yeah, we have a situation also where non-Africans are being initiated into indigenous African spiritual systems, and again there are political implications to this. So my question to you, Mama, is how do we fundamentally merge and develop the development of our spiritual systems along with our emphatic goals as a Pan-African organization?
That's a deep and very important question. I believe that in this time and age, you know, to practice African spirituality ought to be understood as a political act, because it truly is. You know, it really is. And so it's very important, you know, to have a conversation with spiritual leaders about making, you know, the people that they initiate aware, but are they even themselves willing, you know, to do this, you know? So this is important. But we, you know, at our temple, when it is built, and we've started, you know, we've begun initiating, you know, people. We make this very clear. This is a political act, you know, because everything in the end is political. Taking on an African name is political, right? Embracing your ancestors as an African person is a political act, and that's why we encounter so much resistance. You see? Because those who are not our friends understand that very well. We sometimes don't quite get it, but it is profoundly political, right? Building a temple for the ancestors in Africa is imminently, and we know, you see? That's how it comes about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Please,
yes.
keep it short.
Okay, yes, I'll try and keep it short and punchy. I just want to thank the main speaker for this part of this evening. I didn't want to try and pronounce her name. Some people can be very sensitive about their names not being pronounced correctly. That was the only reason, gender. So with respect to the high priestess or priestess, thank you very much. I really didn't want to ask too much of a question about what you presented. I'd be more interested in reading that and then probably have more questions to ask. But I really just wanted to say, in terms of the importance with respect to those of us, people like myself for 20 years, 30 years, and, you know, Shakara's father, there is a movement, and there always has been. So it's just, again, this thing about talking about those of us that are still in the trenches and doing this work. And just to say that, you know, the work you're doing is extremely important, because, as you recognise, the dumbing down of the consciousness of our people is, you know, colossal scale. I just wanted to make that comparison with Extinction Rebellion, and the fact that they are prepared to do what they're doing, as they say, to save their children and their grandchildren. And that shows that for us, if we can see ourselves as we've seen already with whether it's Martin Luther King, there's so many of our ancestors that have that mindset. So apart from the book, what else is it that you're hoping to do? You're talking about building the temple, but what could you encourage us here in London, UK, to be saying to our other brothers and sisters that are not here tonight about why they need to reconsider Afrocentricity International UK as a way forward to better themselves?
I would say very simply that, repeat what I have said tonight, right? That without the guidance and the protection of your ancestors, that you are very vulnerable and weak. And so I will encourage them to try being connected with the ancestors, and I would certainly encourage them to set up a shrine for their ancestors, right? Which is really not very difficult to do. You need a table covered with a white tablecloth. You will need 1, 3, or 7 white candles. You will need a recipient filled with water, because water is life and the ancestors are life. You will need an incense burner in which you will burn incense. You will need a few items that belong to your ancestors. If you have pictures, clothing, glasses, whatever belong to your ancestors, you will do it. You will put it on the table. And you will have a basket with offerings, fruits that they liked, and drinks that they like to drink. If your mother liked coffee, then you should put coffee. If your father liked tea, then you should put tea on the table.
Similar to Kwanzaa.
Not exactly.
Not exactly.
No.
But
there's no coffee and tea on the Kwanzaa table. Right? No, I'm talking about something else here, okay? I'm talking about for your own personal ancestors. Each shrine, each table is personal, right? Right? So it's yours. It's yours. These are your ancestors. And when creating a sacred space, what you're doing is consecrating that particular space, right? To establish a privileged relationship with your ancestors. And you can sit in front of that table when you feel the desire, the need to do so. And basically, make yourself available. Invite them into your house. And they will respond.
Thank you.
Any more questions? We really got to wind up now. Right at the back, I'm going to come to you.
My question.
You have to keep it short.
My question is, and just to say to Shakara what he said about how politics and spiritual mix, I think it's with the nation. If we decide on a unified nation, then the politics and the spiritual comes with it. But my question is to do with the uniformity of, or the necessity for uniformity in terms of our spiritual future, because the idea of African spirituality almost, to me, as I rationale it, is binary opposed to the idea of religiosity. When you understand the divinity within, there's no need for this God up here. Whereas, Islam and Christianity, they have this God up here. We don't need that because we have our God in here. So, therefore, even when Shakara said African spiritualist, I've never heard that phrase said like that. We don't consider ourselves as, a certain religion or sect. And therefore my question would be, how necessary do you think it is that we do consider ourselves as that certain spiritual sect in order to, or is it a matter of we're all just going to be free and,
Spiritual sect?
Like, the Muslims are Muslim, the Christians are Christian. Are we now African spiritualists or are we now above religion?
Your question reminds me of people who say that race does not exist and that we should do away with blackness and whiteness. The problem is that racism does exist, even if there's only one race, you see? And again, my concern is the fact that we are at war, we are in a war, right? And we need weapons. Likewise, we need to equip ourselves to deal with the sorts of Christianity and Islam, right? So when you say that we carry God within, this is all beautiful, but do we still remember that? I don't think so. I think many of us have forgotten that, right? So how do we get our people back on that path of realizing that they are divine? They are divine, but we've forgotten that. Because in our head is this image, right, of the devil being black, like us. You see? So, yes, you're right, but where are we today? Can we afford to say, oh, we know that? No, we don't.
No, I wasn't.
If we did, I wouldn't be here tonight.
I was asking. I wasn't even saying a certain.
Okay.
I'm saying to you, in your vision, what you see as a united future, do you see us all? Would you see like a unified now religion?
We will need that. Just like we need the United States of Africa, we will need a Pan-African religion, yes.
I don't know. For me, I feel like that's where there could be, because, you know, in religion, it's always there for the interpretation of whoever has done it. And, you know, white men taking over Christianity, Arab men took over Islam. I don't know where it rooted, but my point would be, therefore, then, how would we now stop? I'm not saying that we would.
How would we stop what?
I'm not saying we shouldn't assume that we as someone's going to do a bad thing, but I would argue, I would therefore want to understand, how would we keep that spirituality or that religion, because we call it a religion, how would we keep that away from the mistakes organized religion has made otherwise? Because I don't want to say that most African spirituality wouldn't consider themselves religious.
Look, our people need guidance. You know, we are lost. We are dislocated, we are lost. And we need to be told what to do.
That's very true.
You know, it may sound harsh, you may think, oh, this woman is a dictator.
It's true.
But you know what? Maybe that's what we need. An Afrocentric dictator who would say, no, you know, no more of that nonsense. Enough is enough. Right? No more of those weaves, no more of that makeup, no more of that skin bleaching, no more of those white pictures of a white savior, no more of that nonsense. That's what we need. So I don't have the luxury to wonder what would happen to that religion. What I'm worried about is the condition of my people today. And we are lost. And what we try to do with Afrocentricity International is put us back in the right direction. What can happen, I don't know. Our work. And someone was talking about divine rights. It's not a divine right. It's a moral responsibility that we have. And that's why I invite you to join AI in the UK. If you're serious, join. Because we have a moral responsibility. Our ancestors could not have died in vain. Right?
Yes.
Why do you think Dr. Asante and I came all the way from Philadelphia?
Talk again.
You know? Because we feel very strongly that we have a moral responsibility. And we take it very seriously. And Afrocentricity International is a reflection of our seriousness of our commitment. So again, and this will be my last word, I encourage you, I invite you, I implore you to consider joining Afrocentricity International UK.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. We had a great evening. I'd like to thank Dr. Asante again and Dr. Mambo. Thank you very much for your information tonight. If you'd like to join Afrocentricity International, if you can even make sure your name is noted at the back there, and we can give you details, we can give you information.